Today you will solve quadratic equations by quadratic formula. Okay, so we're just going to jump into some examples. So notice we are going to solve each equation by quadratic formula. And remember, quadratic formula works for any quadratic equation, but we use it primarily when we cannot factor that resulting equation. So in the thinking bubble is the quadratic formula. If you have forgotten it, you can always sing the song. And remember, the goal here is you want to make the equation equal to 0. So that is going to be our first step. So our first step is so that it looks like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So in order to make this equal to 0, we'll have to add 4x and subtract 5 to both sides. Okay, so we'll have 3x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. And it's important that we keep it in standard form so that we can identify a, b, and c in the next step. So next. Okay, so then our third step is I would suggest that you find the discriminant, which is the stuff that's under the radical, or the b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so next thing we'll do is we'll take our b, which is 4, we'll square it, we'll subtract 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 5. And I would go directly to a calculator, because sometimes I make goofy errors when I do mental math. This does end up being 76. Okay, so then our next step is to plug it into quadratic formula. So we have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so here we know we have x equals, our opposite of b would be negative 4. Notice the b squared minus 4ac is the stuff under the radical, which we've already found. Okay, so we'll have our plus or minus the square root of 76, all divided by 2, times a, which is 3. Now, all we have left to do is to simplify, which it's probably been a while since we've simplified. We know that we have to have a reduced radical form, so we're going to break down 76. Remember, if it ends in 6, that means it's an even number, we can divide it by 2. 2 goes into 76 38 times. 38 is still an even number, so we can divide that by 2 again. 2 and 19. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get confused, so I will cross out what I've broken down. Square root means I need to have pairs to come out of the radical. So it looks like we'll have x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 19, and then that's all over 6. So next thing we'll do is we'll say, okay, is there a number that goes into all three? Notice you have a 4, a 2, and a 6. And you can divide all those numbers by a factor of 2. So we'll have x equals negative 2 plus or minus 1 square root 19 all over 3, and that is our answer. The end. We are just going to do b the exact same way, so we'll start off by moving that negative 1 to the other side. So 9x squared minus 6x plus 1 equals 0. And you can identify a, b, and c. A equals 9, b equals negative 6, and c equals 1. I would do the discriminant first, b squared, so negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is 1. And this does give us 0 as a discriminant. Next thing is to plug into the quadratic formula. X equals negative b, which in this case would be positive 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which we did in the previous step. The discriminant was 0, divided by 2 times a, 2 times 9. So we know the square root of 0 is just 0, so we'll have x equals 6 over 18, which reduces to 1/3. The end. If we look at letter C, notice that we have it already equal to 0. So we're just going to identify A, B, and C. We're going to do our discriminant next. So b squared would be 0 squared minus 4 times A, which is 7, times C, negative 4. And this does give us a discriminant of 112. All that's left for us to do is to do the quadratic formula. So we'll have x equals the opposite of b, which is just 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which we found to be 112, divided by 2 times 7. Okay, so just like we did before, we're going to do a factor tree for 112. We know because it ends in 2, it's an even number, so we can divide it by 2. It will be 2 and 56. 56 is, we know that's 8 and 7. 8 breaks down to 2 and 4, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. Now, I like to cross out numbers I've already broken down so I don't get confused. And now we're ready to circle our sets of 2. So notice we have a pair of 2's and a second pair of 2's. X equals 0 plus minus 2 times 2, and the 7 doesn't have a partner, so he stays in the radical, all over 14, which is the 2 times 7. So x equals plus minus 4 square root 7 over 14. And notice that you can divide the 4 and the 14 by a factor of 2. So our final answer, plus or minus 2 square root 7 all over 7. The end. Take a minute or two and try the example Hugh tries. Okay, so hopefully you found for A, you get 5/3 and negative 2/3. Remember, if your square root is a whole number, you do technically have 2 solutions, and you need to give me those numeric solutions. Every semester, I will have students just give me the 3 plus minus 7 over 6. No, I want the 2 numeric responses. And then for B, hopefully you found 1 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 4. Guess what? It's practice time. The end.